Today I wanted to talk to you about a great game in the early years of the horror genre, and that is Splatterhouse. Now this was originally released in the arcades in 1988, and then in 1990 it was ported over to the NEC PC Engine and the Turbografx 16, which is the version I have here. Now the North American release is generally viewed as sort of the most watered down and the tamest of all of them, but it's still pretty gruesome for a game at the time. And this was one of the first games that really started to get parents a little concerned about what their kids were playing. So let's take a closer look. Splatterhouse comes packaged in your standard Turbografx case, which is a CD style case, and it can be kind of convenient because you can put it with your other CDs and other games in CD cases. Now you can also replace the front if it gets cracked, but the back part can be kind of a pain because if it gets broken you can't really replace these, and even the labels for the end is on the outside of the case, so that can be a bit of a pain. But they're fairly sturdy, and you can see we've got our hue card here kind of being held in place there. Our manual is pretty standard. It's mostly just black and white, a few simple instructions, and sort of a brief storyline at the beginning. The artwork I think is okay, maybe not great, but okay. I think Rick for some reason looks kind of small, and he almost looks like me, like maybe the Hunchback of Notre Dame or something, rather than, you know, someone who's been empowered by this mask or whatever. Still pretty cool though, and let's get to the game. Now, first off, I'd like to say that the music in this game is a bit on the cheesy side, but I think it's really great. I think it suits the game really well. And I mean, after all, this isn't exactly high art. I mean, this is Splatterhouse, for God's sake. Now, the storyline is that there's an evil Dr. West who has a mansion that we're looking at right now, and he's a parapsychologist, but rather than limit himself to the standard nonsense of parapsychology like ESP, ghosts, telekinesis, that kind of thing, he has all of these creatures hanging about, bats and whatnot. So in come Rick and Jennifer, and they are two students at the local university. They're also studying parapsychology. So they go to the West Mansion and kind of investigate things and see what's going on. And long story short, Jennifer's kidnapped. Rick wakes up in a pool of blood, and he has this terror mask on, which turns him from an average guy to a guy that likes to beat the shit out of bats, apparently. Now, the controls in the game, the turbo pad has two buttons. Button 1 is your jump button, and button 2 is your attack button. And the attack is either a punch, or you can use various weapons that you find in the stages. And also you can do a low kick by pressing down and the attack button, and you can also do sort of a drop kick. The jumping in the game is a little on the stiff side, but I don't really think this is a deal breaker in this case. Now also, during the game you can take different paths. There are holes to fall in, ladders to climb, and that sort of thing. And so sometimes if you fall in a hole especially, you'll end up in a lower part of the level, which is sometimes a little more difficult, and you have to go through that and then you sort of work your way back up. But it is kind of interesting for replay value that there are different paths to take in the game. People off on the first play is you can see this sort of puddle of goop here that some of these guys are throwing out. Now this will hurt you if you touch it, And it can be a little confusing on the first playthrough because you'll see when you kill this enemy here, it also sort of drops a puddle of goop, which sort of rapidly disappears. But it can be a little confusing the first time which ones you can touch and which ones you can't. But again, I don't think it's a huge deal. And of course, if you played through this once, then you'll know which ones you can and can't touch. Now, I do want to note at this point that the mask in this game is red, and that was changed for the North American release because they didn't want any sort of copyright lawsuits from the Friday the 13th movies, because the original game had more of a hockey mask, Jason style look. And I think it's actually kind of sad that they didn't maybe go after the Friday the 13th rights. I mean, imagine if instead of that horrible game that we got on the Nintendo for Friday the 13th, instead of running around as a counselor lighting fireplaces and throwing pain-in-the-ass stones, you could be Jason and just beat the shit out of stuff. So I guess the mansion thing wouldn't have worked out, but I think they could have made it work. Now, most of the bosses are not terribly difficult in this game, especially the first couple. And this one right here, you just want to watch for these falling bottles here at the beginning, and then the only thing that will really get you is trying to judge the different distances. Like, this chair will bounce at different heights, so you generally want to try to approach it when it's pretty close to the ground. And the same thing with these knives. Sometimes, as you can see, I just missed that one there. It's kind of hard to judge exactly where the knife's going to come down. So sometimes you take a hit occasionally with that, but it's not too bad. And the last part of this particular boss fight, the picture comes off of the wall and attacks you. And I almost always take a hit on this one because it can be kind of a pain in the ass, sort of bouncing all around the room. And there's a few different places where the height of different things is what's actually difficult about the game, because it's sort of like above where you could punch, so you have to reposition yourself. Now, one of the other big differences in the North American release and the PC Engine release was that this boss in this stage is an inverted cross, actually, in the arcade and PC Engine versions. Now, there are also crosses in the background on that version, and they've just sort of been, the background's just been turned into bare columns in this. And also, I think one of the really funny glitches in this one is you'll see him walking forward here. Now, in the Japanese and the arcade version, there's a table here with a cross on it and cross on the front, and there's a cross shadow on the right. And so they've taken all those graphics out and they haven't replaced them with anything. So we just end up with these 4 candles kind of just floating in midair. Now, as far as the other bosses are concerned, there's only one that's really a pain in the ass. And that's this guy right here. Now, you have these little embryo things dropping down, and as you can see, the one on the right side was too far over, so I couldn't actually attack him. So if they do land, then they'll do a lot of damage to you. So there's a little bit of luck involved in this one, but just keep punching the shit out of this thing and you should be okay. You also get to fight a possessed Jennifer in one stage, and all I really have to say is somebody does not look too pretty in the morning. Now, there's a trick to defeating the Stage 3 boss without taking too many hits. Now, the problem with this one is when you get close enough to punch this boss, you almost always have to take a hit because his reach is a lot longer than yours. So the trick is to pick up the shotgun at the beginning of the stage, but don't use it. Use your low kick on all your enemies. And you'll see that I accidentally fire off a shot or two, I think, during this run. But it shouldn't be too big of a problem. But just carry this gun all the way through. And something funny happened when I was capturing it here. Some of these holes that you can fall in sort of disappeared midway through. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. And you can see right here I pick up the stone, but I think I accidentally picked the gun back up and shoot this one here. But not a problem. You can shoot 1 or 2 shots and you should still be fine. Now when you come to this next stone here, be sure to pick it up and hit this guy with it. And now you see there's a second gun, and then you just keep picking one up after the other and walking forward. And even though I didn't do so well on this particular run,
you can see that you can shoot the boss and then sort of keep him at bay. Just be sure to try to time your shots a little bit better than I did. Now, the last stage in this game is basically just platforming. Don't try to hit any of these enemies because it doesn't do any good, and you may take a hit. I think I'd take one right here, maybe? Yes. So I take a hit, but it's not too big of a deal. Just try to make sure to stay calm, get through all of this, and the last boss is actually pretty easy. Now, the tombstone here actually was a cross in the original game, but of course they've replaced it to get rid of all the cross imagery. Now, you want to be sure to avoid all of the falling, I guess, dirt clods here, because they will do damage, and avoid the hands, and just keep punching the crap out of this boss, and that's pretty much it. And that's pretty much the game. So overall, I'd say that I really wish that I had had a Turbografx as a kid, because I think I would have loved this back in 1990. And although the North American release is a little bit more tame than the Japanese release or the arcade version of the game, I think it's still pretty gory for something that came out at that time, and something that would have appealed to a lot of kids like me who kind of liked horror movies and those sorts of things. So even though some of the controls are a little bit stiff, and there's some cheap shots here and there, I think overall it's a great game. And if you have a Turbografx, you definitely owe it to yourself to get this one.